Busboom Wolfe, the news and talk of Decatur, Talk 101 FM, online at DecaturRadio.com. Welcome back to the program, and of course, pleased to have our friends, our firefighter friends with us this morning, Doug.
I'm going to let each of you guys introduce yourselves. You are?
My name is Todd Cox. I'm president of Decatur Firefighters Local 505.
Adam Ruderman, with the Decatur Fire Department, and the District 3 Vice President with the AFFI.
All right, so what I'd like to focus on is fire inspectors and the lack of them here in Decatur. We had 3 of them retire this past few months. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And what kind of situation has that created for the fire department here in Decatur when it comes to, let's say, an arson fire? What are the situations you're running into?
Well, theoretically, if you were to be the police department and eliminate the whole detective bureau the next day, that's pretty much effectively what has happened to the fire department right now. Currently, we're held waiting on scene, usually anywhere from a half hour to an hour, depending on where the inspector's coming from the fire marshal's office. That ties up a company, and waiting for them to get there.
Now, Adam, there was a videotape put out about a week ago or two now. I can't even remember. The city manager was pretty to the point that you guys are a Chicago-based fire union, and I think he was driving home the point that you Chicago guys are bad guys. From Chicago?
Right. Well, it's funny. My nephew had brought up after the fact that I have a suburban Chicago accent, and that he thought it was humorous that I was advocating for the fact that we were not a Chicago-based union with a suburban Chicago accent.
You guys are here in Central Illinois, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The AFFI home office is in Springfield, Illinois. We were also founded in Springfield, Illinois.
When were you founded?
It was October 22nd of 1935.
So you've been around a day or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost a century.
All right.
We're getting close.
Why does Decatur need qualified fire inspectors here in the city as opposed to maybe calling the state fire marshal's office?
Well, one of the main reasons that you have a fire prevention division in a city this size is because one of the most important things in fire prevention is code enforcement. So whenever new business is being built from the ground up, fire prevention has a hand in making sure that all the codes that are required are followed and in place when that business opens. And that's not only for the protection of the business owner, employees, but as well as the public. But the issue of also having a fire prevention bureau in your as part of your fire department is that if you don't, then you have to maintain what is called a chain of evidence. If there's a fire that's suspicious and it has to be investigated, then we call in one of our inspectors. If we don't have inspectors, then we have to utilize the state fire marshal office, and they will provide one. So the process starts of finding an inspector that's available, and then because of there can be no break in the chain of evidence, which means the fire department...
It's in effect a crime scene.
Exactly. We have to maintain control of the scene, which means a company that would normally be back in service and able to continue service to the public is now basically idle until that investigator arrives on scene and takes control.
You know, the other thing is that these inspectors... they actually are all qualified to go fight. I mean, the guys that were here, weren't they? They were qualified to go fight fires, and they were, if I remember right, they were EMS certified, or at least they could do an EMS call.
That is correct. They were fully certified firefighters through the state. Actually, 2 of them were actually on the dive team as well, so they actually had some technical rescue type training as well that they were available to respond if necessary. So. And
like fired captains and all, they're all qualified. Everybody's qualified to do those jobs. Is that correct?
Yes, they are. Yeah, and the misnomer there is City Manager Wrighton tried to perceive those all 3 of them were at the fire captain level, and that was actually incorrect as well. There was one that was a fire captain, and the rest were basically firefighters that had been promoted in that position and held the rank of lieutenant. So.
As far as, let's give some examples. You said the other night you had to wait for a guy to come from where, Mattoon?
That's correct. Just the other night, we had a fire that was in a vacant structure that we had to wait for him to come respond from Mattoon, which approximately was about 45 minutes to an hour for him to get there.
And if another fire would have broken out, then, we would have been at a deficit literally trying to make sure it got covered, right?
That is correct. And when I first started in 2008, we ran about 8,000 calls a year. We had an additional fire apparatus on the street and about 15 more people, firemen. Today, we run about 12,000 calls with one less fire company and, like I said, 15 less people than what I had when I first came.
12,000 a year.
Yes.
So you guys are running all day, every day at almost.
Yeah, there's certain days we do, and, you just never know.
Now, let me give you an example of that. I mean, at the end of May, I think it was, we had Starship Billiards. That burned. That was quite a big fire, too, which used a lot of city resources. And in that 48-hour period, I think you had like 11 structure fires or something between arson and that fire at Starship?
That's correct. I was on shift the night that the Starship Billiards had started on fire. We had a garage fire just before that, cleared the scene there, and then the Starship fire came in. Then another fire in a vacant house came in at 1800 East William Street, which caught two houses on fire on either side of the original fire building. And then after those fires, there was another fire up in Park City in the trailer park, another trailer fire real early the same shift morning. So.
And you're waiting on fire inspectors for a couple of those at least, right?
Yes, that's true. The same fire inspector from Taylorville, Bob Dunn, had come out to inspect the fire at Starship Billiards. I'm not sure if he was brought over to East William Street, but I do believe that he had not left town yet and then came over to inspect the trailer fire as well.
But meanwhile, you have a unit, at least one unit tied up waiting for a fire inspector. Is that correct?
Yes. That particular evening, Mount Zion Fire Department's ladder truck came over to Starship Billiards because we had pulled companies off of that fire to go help fight the fire over on William Street.
Okay, let me talk to you about something that may be a little boring for the listeners. Let's try to make it interesting. ISO ratings, ISO. What are they and why are they important?
All right. ISO stands for Insurance Service Organization. And what they do is they rate fire departments on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as their capabilities, 1 being the best rating you could have. Decatur, I believe, at this point in time is a 2.
Which is pretty good.
Yes, and I got to give credit to our fire chief, Jeff Abbott, because he has worked very hard to bring us to that point. And it's not just how many fire apparatus you have or how many fighters you have. It has to do with water supply. It has to do with communications. And other aspects come into play.
And those missing inspectors could possibly hurt us on that.
That's correct. The ISO rating in recent years has rated heavily on the fire prevention side of the fire department as far as how aggressive they are at getting out there and educating the public.
If that rating were to go from two to, let's say, 5 or 6 or something like that, would that impact insurance rates for homeowners or business owners?
That is 100% correct. It would have a definite impact. I know this because before I was a firefighter, I sold property and casualty insurance for Prudential. And they rated the rate that you got on your homeowner's policy for residential property. They combined Fire Protection District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then finally 9 and 10. In any event, if your ISO rating drops, then the next time your homeowner's insurance comes up for renewal, there could be an impact on your premium because that insurance company knows that your municipality's rating has dropped and it will cost you money.
So it is important for taxpayers to make sure that that rating remains at a 2 and doesn't drop any lower.
It would behoove them financially.
We need to jump in here, guys. It's 7:41, and we need to grab a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more with our friends from the fire department. Up next, Busboom Wolfe, Talk 101. Busboom Wolfe, the news and talk of Decatur, Talk 101 FM, online at DecaturRadio.com, visiting with the firefighters from Decatur. Guys, I got to ask, when you're talking about, maintenance, replacement cost, replacing things. We are well into that window. Are you guys getting enough money to make sure that things are running, that we're able to replace things? I know we got ourselves some aging equipment.
Yeah, that's correct. We have a lot of, ideally the fire department needs to replace about one rig every year to stay on a good, even schedule. We haven't replaced one in probably about 3 or 4 years now. We currently have a reserve ladder truck that is 26 years old, so it's getting to the end of its lifespan and definitely needs to be taken care of.
And if you take that in for repairs, I mean, you had that one that has to be repaired, right?
Correct. And there's also one that's setting that still is about a year out from being sent back to the Pierce manufacturing for a defect with the frame rail issue that is ongoing.
And that's going to take at least a year or more.
That's correct.
Okay, let me ask you this. They're talking about the pensions all the time. That's what I'm hearing is the pension costs are hurting the city. It's hurting every city, obviously, in Illinois. What would be your answer if they say, well, we're trying to hold pension costs down by maybe contracting this out? What would be your answer to that?
Okay, well, there's a state statute that actually protects professional firefighters from a municipality or fire protection district replacing union work with private sector work. So number one, that would be a violation of a state statute if they brought in private workers to try to replace.
Even a retired fireman or something like that, that would be a violation of that statute.
Correct. Which is a good point, which also speaks to the 3 inspector positions. They're contractually protected. And the fact that the city manager's idea of replacing that protected work with civilians or employees that are already existing at the Civic Center is not doable. They're contractually protected positions.
And you had mentioned earlier about code enforcement. In other words, the inspections before a fire. Hopefully the fire never happens. You do code inspections. They're talking, if I remember the city manager when he was on last week or 2 weeks ago with us, I think he said community development inspector, some city inspector in some other department would handle those. Does that even sound possible? Or could that be done?
I believe it's possible. However, I don't know. I have not heard through one news story since our inspectors have retired one name of a person that this work has been assigned to, nor have I heard one report from anybody as to what work has been done based on where it was assigned.
So, in other words, if some other department is going to take this over, you haven't heard who that would be or how that would happen?
There's been no plan whatsoever presented to us.
Okay. Are you in negotiations right now for a new contract?
Yes, we are currently in negotiations.
Okay. When are you meeting with the city manager next, and what do you expect from either him or his staff as far as getting this issue taken care of?
Well, currently the union and the city have met 2 different times. The first time being a real brief meeting. The second time we exchanged basically a conceptual idea of what the city manager would like to do. We have yet to receive a proposal from the city, so we're hoping that maybe today might be that day where we get something definite as far as what his plan is.
We've, I guess the big thing is that, can you guys get those positions back? At this point, are you going to stand, your ground to get them back, or is this something that we're going to see them fuss about for a while?
We are going to fight for these positions. This is something that has been in place for decades. It is a situation where the movement from 3 positions from fire suppression into fire prevention will create 3 vacancies in fire suppression. Now, every single time that you replace, and I'm speaking a little bit to the pension situation, there are two tiers of firefighters. Any firefighter that was hired after January 1, 2011 is considered a Tier 2 firefighter. They have much different pension benefits than a Tier 1 firefighter. By way of explaining the cost to the city, the difference between a Tier 1 firefighter and a Tier 2 firefighter is just over 50%. So the cost of funding a Tier 2 firefighter's pension is costing the city literally half what it costs to fund a Tier 1. So it only makes sense that you encourage the Tier 1 firefighters' retirement as soon as they can, as soon as they want to, and replace them with Tier 2 firefighters.
Because the cost will be lower to the city.
There's virtually no unfunded liability for a Tier 2 firefighter.
I see. Okay. Because there's enough money going in to meet that expense.
Correct. The money that the Tier 2 firefighters are paying in as a percentage of payroll would be 9.455%. Now, the difference that the city has to make up is actually less than if they had to pay Social Security for a private employee.
Interesting. All right. Now, let me ask you a question. You're short on the inspectors. I know the number of employees is down a bit from what it had been. And you're coming into summer vacation season, or you're in the middle of summer vacation season. I take it you guys are going to be shorthanded this summer.
That's correct. Obviously right now with the inspectors leaving, and then we also had 5 other retirements, so we lost 2 positions due to budget cuts there in January. So now we're basically 10 people down from where we were at as far as last year goes. Next day, I think my next shift day, we're hiring 3 people overtime. So it's one of those things where normally we wouldn't have to hire any.
Are you bringing in people on overtime from time to time that ends up costing the city more money in the long run because of overtime?
That is, those numbers will be found out here in the future, I'm sure. But I do believe that it's going to be an increase in overtime, definitely. So.
Well, I know for a fact, in addition to that when the city manager knew that the fire inspectors were going to be retiring all in the same week as early as September of last year, and the overtime budget with the fact that we're down now 8 firefighters total was not adjusted to your point that there are more vacations and holidays taken during the summer months, but there was no increase in the overtime budget to adjust for what was going to happen. And the problem there is that they turn around and say, well, look how much money these firefighters are making in overtime, and try to make that an issue that we're earning all this overtime money, when had they only anticipated the replacement of those 3 inspector positions and had more people at the fire academy this spring, we wouldn't get into an overtime problem budgetarily.
All right, we're going to wrap it up right now. What would be your final message to the city manager or to the city council? Because the city council gets the vote on this eventually. What would be your message to the city council as far as funding these positions?
We definitely feel that these positions are necessary. Obviously, they do a lot more than just fire investigations. There's a ton of stuff that these guys do. A lot of other cities do it differently, but they also have double, sometimes triple the amount of people assigned to their fire prevention bureau. I think these things are, it's sad that these have been taken away from the city the way they have been. I think there's obviously the right way to go about negotiating or talking about these inspectors, and apparently, I guess there's now the right way of doing things.
All right, Todd and Adam, thank you so much for being with us here on Busboom Wolfe.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you so much. You're listening to 100.9 WZUS Macon Decatur. We're Busboom Wolfe on Talk 101 FM. We'll be back for our final hour in just a moment.